back to Shift Happens, the podcast that explores the shifts driving automotive retail success. I'm Walter, your moderator, joined by Within
Hey,
and Michael.
Hey, how y'all doing today?
In our last episode, we focused on the middle of the road to the sale, the fun stuff, vehicle selection, presentation, and the test drive. Today, we're heading toward the finish line, presenting the numbers, handling objections, and closing the sale. These steps often make salespeople sweat, but when done right, they can be the smoothest part of the process. Let's dive in. Within, why is the way you present the numbers so critical?
well, this is the part that the salesperson has been worrying about, and it's the part where the customer typically gets the idea of where he sits with the dealership as far as their transparency and how they're going to treat him as a client. And so it's where the transparency and your confidence matters the most. So how you present the numbers the first time can either reinforce the trust that you've built or it can wipe it all out. So one big mistake, just dumping a piece of paper in front of the customer without any explanation. Instead, you need to walk them through like a guide, not a gatekeeper, and make sure that the language is simple without any fancy jargon. Just continue to emphasize the value that they're getting and not just the price. And honestly, it's also a perfect time to pull out something objective, like an Advanta-STAR competitive comparison report. This can be used to balance off price if it hasn't been brought up before, or you can bring up the Advanta-STAR competitive comparison again if you've already seen it somewhere else in the road to the sale. When customers see objective data with benefits on the vehicle that they've chosen and how it stacks up against the competition, it stops feeling like your opinion and starts feeling like proof. And so that type of third-party validation makes the numbers easier to digest.
So clarity and tone are key. Michael, what's your take?
Oh, I'd add that timing matters also. If you've done your job, you've done a good needs assessment, you've nailed the walk around, the feature benefit presentation, right? You've given a great test drive, and so you've built a value in the product. The number should feel natural, the natural next step, not an ambush. Okay. So when you hit them with the numbers, it shouldn't be something that they're not expecting. There's a Monroney sticker, window sticker, if you will, on the car. So when you're looking and presenting these numbers, it really should be just a validation of what you spent the last, 30, 40, 50 minutes going over. So, when I present the numbers, I like to recap some of the unique advantages that I've shown the customer. Sometimes I'll pull out that Advanta-STAR report and highlight a few of those features, especially the ones they loved. It's a reminder of why the numbers are what they are. Okay.
Mm,
And so if we've done our job as a salesperson, building value, showing them features, benefits, and advantages as well, it's the numbers shouldn't be an issue. It should validate why you're asking the numbers that you are.
Great points. It's about making the write-up a confirmation, not a confrontation. Let's talk about what happens next, handling objections. Within, everyone knows objections are part of the game. What's the best mindset to have when they come up?
Well, first, don't panic. And that's the natural inclination is, oh, this thing is falling apart around my ears. But the thing is, a natural or a good or a well-trained salesperson knows that an objection is a buying signal. I mean, if the guy says nothing, that's when you should panic. But an objection is simply a step on the road to the sale that means, I want to buy your automobile. Here's how to sell it to me. It means the customer's interested. They need reassurance or they need an adjustment to something. There might need to be a slight detour, but the worst move is to get defensive or to start discounting the price immediately. If someone has an objection to the vehicle and you start discounting, not only does that validate their objection in a bad way, but it means to them it's a signal that you can't overcome their objection and that their objection is real. And at the same time, it means that you don't have any confidence in the value of what you're selling. So you do need to listen, acknowledge, and then respond with confidence. And always remember, most objections fall into a few categories, either price, payment, trade-in, uh, equipment, timing. And the thing is, once you hear that objection and you can take it and make it specific, do some more questioning, do some
Mhm.
more back and forth, then you'll know how to handle an objection.
Yeah, if I can interject too with, and one of the systems that we used years ago was a Foursquare. And
Right?
I always liked the Foursquare because it did just what you talked about. It would isolate the objection. And once you focused on where the real objection was, whether it was price, whether it was payment, enough for my trade-in, down payment, whatever it was, and then you could focus on that particular one. And I just thought that that was a system that really taught, especially brand new salespeople, the art of negotiations and made it simpler. I know there's a lot of, back and forth on whether people like it or not, in the industry, but I always
Yeah,
thought that was a
Foursquare's
really
been
good tool.
denigrated by a lot of people, but it definitely has its points, especially if it's used properly and with respect to the customer and with respect to transparency.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So let's give our listeners some real world examples. What do customers actually say? Here's objection number one. That monthly payment is too high.
Yep, that's a classic. And the key here is to reframe the conversation. First of all, I'd probably respond with something like, I know that your budget is important, and I understand that keeping your payment comfortable is important. Let's review some of your options. So sometimes adjusting the term or looking at different incentives can make this work without sacrificing the features that you want. And here's where the Advanta-STAR report can also be your ally. You can show how some of the features compare to what they get on another vehicle that's in their payment range. And you can also show other, some other things that might make the payment matter less or make other costs go down, such as insurance comparisons and resale value. So you're proving the value to them.
Hmm. And so here's another. Objection number two. I want to shop around before deciding.
Yeah, that's a common objection, and it's not always a stall. A lot of it bears in trust. Here's how I'd handle it. I'd try to make them feel comfortable and say, look, I understand you want to make the best decision. Most of our customers feel the same way. But, when they looked at all the variables, they found that we had the best combination of sales and service and price for this vehicle that you're looking at. And so you try to, again, isolate that objection. So what's the one thing you need to either feel comfortable moving forward today or to where you're comfortable in making that decision? And then when they answer that question, that's when you try to focus in and overcoming that. Here again, part of negotiation is just overcoming the no's. I'm not ready to buy today. I want to shop around. We always told NO means not NO, it means KNOW. I don't know enough to make the decision today. So, if they decided they weren't going to do business today, I'd say, fine, here, take this Advanta-STAR competitive comparison with you.
Mhm.
When you compare side by side our vehicle and whatever else you're looking at, it's going to be clear why we're going to be the best choice with this vehicle here. And that way, there's plenty of confidence in what you're doing. They can be confident because, there's nothing to hide. Everything's out there. They've got a price, they've got the features, benefits, and advantage. And, when you feel confident in the product that you're, selling, they're going to be back. They're going to be back.
Mm.
Yeah, I always telegraphed that I was definitely completely comfortable with them shopping around when I would introduce the Advanta-STAR comparisons. And this is like a 1-2. First of all, you say, well, that's great. I understand you really want to make your decision based on full knowledge, having everything, in hand and knowing exactly what everybody offers. And so before you go, and again, that's telegraphing, yeah, I'm not going to hide their keys. I'm not going to have the manager lock the door on them or anything. Yeah. Before you go, uh, we subscribe to a third-party information source that has all of the information on all of our vehicles and all of the competitors too. And I'd like to have that. I'd like to let you look at that for your consideration, and I could probably get a copy made for you too, so that you could take it with you. How does that sound? And so this does two things. First of all, it puts them at ease that them saying they want to shop is not going to be a confrontational thing. But the second thing it does is it slows them down and it gives you a way to make some time to go get the sales manager, the floor closer, whoever it is, to get a second party involved so that everybody can help see what the objection is, and everybody can help them make a good decision. So you can then excuse yourself and say, let me go get that information for you. Obviously it's
Oh,
on your desktop, it's on your laptop, it's on your iPad, depending on what you're showing them. But if you're going to let them take a copy with you, then you can go and excuse yourself, go talk to a manager and run off a copy of one or two of the comparisons against the vehicle they're shopping. And
yeah.
that gives you a chance to talk to the manager, tell them what's going on, and see if there's some other way they'd like to approach this.
Yeah, that's a great point with, and I used to do something similar. I create what we call an exit packet. And that way, back in the day when everybody had brochures that they would give them. So what would a typical salesperson do? They give them a card, staple a business card to it and say, call me when you're ready to buy. But so we would do an exit packet. And, again, it depends on the way the customer is, where they are in their journey. Somebody 6 months out, they might not really be looking for numbers. But if they're ready to buy and they're not quite ready to make that decision, that's where you get the help. And I like the way you segued into here, let me go print that off. And then that way the manager comes in and the manager, they can pick up where you left off, especially if you got that report ready to go. Because they don't know specifically, what you're shopping against, or, you may have found out early on what they were competing against and you
If
had
not,
that
you should
report.
find out then, right?
Yeah, but so you may have already had that report printed out, especially if it was a set appointment. But a fresh up walk in the door, there's no way you're going to know that, and you're going to have to take the time to pull it up. But it's a great segue to bring in that help, that added management assistance. And the beauty of what we call that exit packet, if you will, is when they went home and maybe they shop in 4 or 5 different retailers. At the end of the day, whose information stood out? Ours. Okay. Everybody else may have given a brochure and a price on the back of a business card. But with us, we've got a detailed report showing where we're better than the other guy. It's laid out using the third-party sources that we cite. And so that's where the transparency comes in. And again, I know a lot of dealerships, they don't like the customer to walk. They want them to buy. And, they didn't really like us letting the customers go. But I can tell you, I had a whole lot of be-back dust and that worked. And I sold a lot of returning customers. They just needed that time to make the decision.
Hmm.
If you're doing this, you may not need the be-back dust, because if you're going ahead and you're giving them all this information and you're slowing them down, you're getting a TO if necessary, you're only telegraphing that you're giving them some be-back dust. Basically, you're trying to keep them in the dealership, especially if you're going to go ahead and let them peruse the Advanta-STAR comparison material on your
Hmm.
iPad or on your desktop right there in the dealership. That's
Hmm.
why I always hesitate a little bit before doing a printout. But it's two different ways to do the same thing.
Yeah. And it's effective, as you said, in both ways. And one of the things, the segues was, look, before you go, let me share this with you. And that's assuming that,
Yep.
you haven't brought it up earlier in the road to the sale. And we talked about this before. It keeps the customers engaged in the process while you go get help. And so you're right. Ultimately, no, we don't want the customers leaving because, in a lot of cases, your chances of seeing them ever again are very remote. But, with good follow-up and if you've done your job, you can get, like I said, I sold a heck of a lot of beatbacks. So, okay, let's go ahead and move on to some of the other objections.
All right, objection number 3. I need more for my trade-in.
Right. And this can be emotional. This can be from a place of misinformation. This can just be a negotiating tactic on the part of the customer. But people often do love their old car, but there's a reason that they're trading it in. And instead of saying, that's all it's worth, what I'd say is, I get it. Your car's been a big part of your life, but here's how we arrived at this number. You know, uh, this market data that comes from KBB, this market data that comes from the auctions, plus we've already estimated what the reconditioning would have to be and what the demand is. The good news is this offer saves you a lot of money on sales taxes. I mean, assuming you're one of the many states that has a sales tax credit on a trade-in, which I think most do. And what this does is this helps put you closer to the payment you want because of that sales tax credit. If they still hesitate, again, I might redirect back to an Advanta-STAR comparison because you tell the customer, let's also remember you're getting that panoramic view camera that helps you see all around the vehicle when you're parking. We discussed how important it is when you're backing up that this vehicle can detect something behind you and automatically brake. Recap some of those new safety features, those new convenience features and stuff that their old car doesn't have. I mean, if they have a 2009, they might have Bluetooth, but they're not going to have a lot of these other features. They probably won't even have a backup camera.
And then let's talk about objection number 4. I need to talk to my spouse. What do you have to say about that one, Michael?
Well, and in today's market, it may not necessarily be a spouse. It could be a significant other. What I used to love was when a couple would come in and they weren't married, and especially if the car was for the young lady, and the third baseman that was sitting there trying to school her on how to buy the car, we knock him, out of the negotiation process is just by asking a simple question. So when are you guys getting married? And he would shut up, clam up, and then she'd look at him and, she'd do one of these, point to the ring finger, and you'd never hear another word out of him. And then you could focus on selling a vehicle. But, well, here's the truth. Sometimes it's real, sometimes it's just a stall. I like to handle it like this. Absolutely, you should both feel good about the decision, So let's do this. What's the biggest question that you still have? What do you think that their biggest question is going to be? Is it price? Is it features? Can we really afford this? Let's make sure we cover and give you these answers so that when you sit down and you talk about it realistically, you've got all the answers that may come up. And then if you've got that Advanta-STAR already printed out, slide it across them and say, hey, look, this will give them an objective breakdown. They may be leaning toward another vehicle than what you're leaning toward. So it's why it's going to stand out. And, it's not just coming from me. And I can remember years ago people saying, well, you're just telling me this because you sell Toyota or Chevrolet, whatever. And that's where the third party report came in to say, no, 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 this isn't what I'm saying. This is what Motor Trend said. This is what Car and Driver said. This is what KBB said. And so by shifting it to those independent assessments and not just doing Toyota speak, Chevrolet speak, or what have you, it's going to
Yep.
build that independent value and assessment in that report. And most of the time, but not always, most of the time, it's going to lead to you getting a sale.
Yeah, because there's nothing like 2 pages of Insurance Institute for Highway Safety crash tests to help convince someone, especially a spouse.
Oh, absolutely. And if they were involved in an automobile accident and the vehicle did its job, they're going to be looking for that information. And the other person may not be quite as sold on that safety feature or those crash reports with. And it's a great point.
So the theme is listen, acknowledge, clarify, and present solutions, not pressure. I love that you're both focusing on empathy and guidance, not hard selling.
Yeah, if you've done your job right, built rapport, demonstrated value, the number of objections drops dramatically. But when they do come up, you need to treat them as opportunities and not obstacles, and definitely don't become defensive or offensive with the client.
Great insights. Now let's wrap this up with the big moment, closing the sale. Within, why do so many salespeople stumble at the close?
Because either they think it's a wrestling match, or they're not confident enough, or they're just worried and they don't want to see all their work fall down.
Hmm.
So closing needs to not be about pressure, though. It's about timing, like Mike said before, but it's also about confidence. And if you follow the road to the sale properly, the close should naturally follow, and heck, some of the times the customer will close the sale for you. But my advice is to ask for the sale confidently and assume the yes. Use language like, let's get your paperwork started so you can enjoy your new car. Simple, forward moving, and positive.
Yeah, and I'd add this, don't forget about the emotional attachment, from the test drive. When you're asking the positive questions, where's the first place you want to take this vehicle? And then they start talking about, yeah, I'm going to get on Interstate 10 and drive east, head toward Orlando to Disney World. You know, you got to remind them what they loved about the vehicle. And, that's part of recap. Recap's part of negotiation. You said you liked this feature, with the infotainment system, that you didn't have it in your current vehicle and you saw it in somebody else's. And so, if they start hesitating at the 11th hour, then, we'll pull out that Advanta-STAR again and say, here's that chart, here's that stat that we talked about that was really an eye opener. Do you remember? This is where your choice really shines over, the other vehicle that you were looking at. Sometimes just a little nudge, can be the confidence boost that they need. And a lot of times that's what the customer is looking for. They're looking for reassurance that they're making the best possible decision. I remember a guy coming in and, say, well, I just want to make sure I'm getting a good deal. And, right or wrong, the sales manager says, look, you can't just call 1-800 dial a deal to make sure you got a good deal. Okay. You know,
We should
it's
start that number though.
yeah, I know that might be a good one to get. And just say, oh yeah, especially if you saw that Advanta-STAR, right? But getting back to all seriously, a lot of times people just need to feel confident from somebody, and usually it's the salesperson or sales manager that gives them the confidence to that they're making the right choice and doing the right thing. Because the last thing you want is the customer to come back 2 or 3 days later with buyer's remorse or regrets or I didn't, you forced me into this, or I didn't really want to take this, but you kind of made me feel. No, no, that's no good for anybody. Okay, so
No,
like you said, the leading questions and leading them down the path to the road where it's their decision, not yours, forced on them. That's
That,
key.
that's exactly
but it
right.
does follow. Yeah, it does follow from the entire road to the sale. The closing is not just the last step or the culmination, or the closing is the natural buildup from doing your job properly the entire time up to it. And you can draw on those other steps if you've done them properly when you're closing. For instance, you could do a natural assumed close by asking, what songs are you going to load into that 20 gigabyte hard drive that's in the infotainment system? It's natural assuming closing, but it's also building up on features and benefits that you should have gone over carefully with during your demonstration.
Yeah, and that's where product knowledge comes in. And we've been talking about that throughout our whole series. And making sure, and you're going to know that from your vehicle selection that we talked about last time. If you got them on the right vehicle, closing the sale really should be just a culmination of the whole effort from top to bottom, and it should be a lot easier. It shouldn't be like going to the dentist and getting teeth pulled. But unfortunately, in a lot of cases, that's what the customers expect, and that's how they experience it. And so we can help change that one interaction at a time. And what we provide, I think, will go a long way in helping it be a lot smoother close.
Yeah,
Yep.
the customer shouldn't need laughing gas to feel okay about, finishing the deal. But anyway, yeah, closing isn't about forcing their hand. It's about leading them. And if you've done your job through the earlier steps, this part should be really easy, like you guys have said. All right. Do you guys have anything else you want to talk about?
I want to edit something in.
Okay, yeah.
I was thinking of stuff what Bob used to say when we talk about giving them the value for the car.
Oh no, not the rock through water.
Yeah.
Oh,
So when you're talking about what a customer's vehicle is valued at, Don't do like one of these guys we used to work with. Customer bought a Hyundai from the early 80s. And let's just face it, today's Hyundais are so much better than what they were way back when.
Maybe we
And,
should do this without any mention of any make at all. Or
well, I think it's
use a
relatable.
Hugo. Use a
No,
Hugo since it's off the market.
I mean, people who sold the cars back then would know it, but I'll go ahead and take the make out. We'll start again at the top. We're talking about the value of somebody's used car. You don't want to insult them. I mean, we had a guy years ago, he was talking about the vehicle that this individual was trading in, and it was an off-brand way back when. And he told him point blank, look, the only thing that drops faster than the value of your car is a rock through water. And so, the customer got really upset and walked out the door. Well, I mean, it may have been a funny anecdote, but, and true at the time, but, that's not how you go about approaching, presenting numbers on the vehicle. It might have been that person's first vehicle. They may have had a love affair with that, or gave him a personal name. That might have been Susie to him, but like I said, didn't make the sale, and it was just one of those folklore deals from way back in the early days of selling.
Well,
Needless to
remember
say, that's not what we want to do.
he did the hand motion. He did.
I'm dropping a rock. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean,
The only
it's
thing
just,
that the only thing that drops quicker than the value of your car is a rock through water.
yeah. Yeah. The
Moral
visual
of that.
presentation, had a lot to do with that. Just FYI, Walter, that was Bob that did that.
Okay.
Yeah, on a
And the
showroom
customer
floor.
and the customer left faster than a rock falling
Oh
through
boy, he
water
just
for
spun
sure.
around on his heels and left. I'll give you another one too. Perhaps customer came in. He says, "I just came here looking for a good buy." So they bring in Bob. They said, "Bob, go ahead and blow this customer out." He says, "I understand you're looking for a good buy." He says, "Yeah." He says, "Okay, goodbye." True story.
Yeah,
True
we could
story.
do like 2 hour podcast on blowing customers out.
Oh, yeah, Bob was the master. They would throw Bob in, especially when he worked out New Orleans East. Dave Osang would say, "Here, Bob, I'll give you $100 to go blow this customer out," because the customer was just completely. There's no way in hell they were buying a car anyway. They were
Yeah.
just totally unrealistic numbers they were looking for, and quite arrogant and obnoxious. And
Single
they just
digit
blow him out. He said,
credit
"Okay, here,
score.
Bob. Here's a voucher for here's $100. Go blow this guy out." He goes, "Understand you're looking for a good buy? Yeah, goodbye."
Yeah. So we have some updates. The 2026 Toyota Prius, its regular hybrid price is up by $260. The plug-in though is up by 400. Other than that, the only thing that changes is on the Prius plug-in, which now includes a nightshade trim. This has black accents, 19-inch black wheels. It's previously been on the regular Prius. Uh, Without any explanation, the EPA range on electric only has been lowered by 1 mile on the Prius plug-in hybrid. It's now 44 miles on the SE and 39 miles on the Nightshade and the XSE. The Corolla sedan has gone up by $610 or $750 on the hybrid. The FX trim has been discontinued as it was only a 1 year package, and now the hatchback will have an FX trim, but only for 1,600 units. So if you want a better handling Toyota Corolla hatchback, you better already contact your Toyota dealership. And blind spot and rear cross traffic monitors are now standard across all Toyota Corollas. The sedans, the hybrid, the hatchback, everything. The Toyota Sequoia for 2026 sees a $2,000 MSRP increase. But the power folding third row seat is now standard, and leather is now standard on Sequoia Limited, and it's even optional on the SR5. And on Platinum and Capstone, you can no longer get those in rear-wheel drive. Four-wheel drive is now standard on those. The 2026 Toyota Camry also gets a new Nightshade trim level, which is mostly just signature black trim accents, 19-inch wheels. It's based on the SE, so it's based on the second trim level. The Toyota Camry XSE now offers available rain sensing wipers and driver memory seats.
Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, hit the like button, subscribe for more, and drop a comment below. We'd love to hear from you and it really helps out.